He has more than 30 years of experience in electrical industry, in manufacturing, marketing, and leadership. He's going to share with us his journey, how he became president, how he became ambassador, and we are really thankful to you, sir, that you joined with us. Tell us about how your day has been.
Thank you very much, Mariam and Teja, and to all of you who are on this call. First of all, really appreciate your inviting me for this call. It's very special for me for a few reasons which I want to talk of. First of all, I hope you're all safe and well, and your family members or loved ones are feeling safe. These are unusual, unprecedented times for everyone on this earth. So do take care. This too shall pass. The second, like all of you, I was also an engineer at one time. I did my bachelor's in engineering from an institute in North India in Punjab called Punjab Thapar Engineering College in Patiala. And so I can very well relate to what you're going through right now, the same anxieties of studying also and not knowing what the future holds, and not knowing where the jobs are, whether master's is going to be helpful or MS in a specific field or doing an MBA or where to go. So I know exactly the kind of anxieties you're going through, and perhaps even more now because the competition has also increased, the challenges have increased. So all the best to you when you prepare for your final year and your final thesis and go out into the big open world. The third, may I especially mention that this session I would welcome if it is totally interactive. So anytime, I don't know what process you have of letting me know if you have a question, whether you can raise your hand or you can signal or you can let Mariam know, who can let me know on this. So it's totally interactive. Anything that I share, if you want to know some more about it, feel free to ask me anytime. Okay?
Yes, sir. Totally.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So to share with you from my about my journey, I was born in a place called Jalandhar, a small town in Punjab, and I come from a typical North Indian middle class family. My father was a very small entrepreneur in Punjab, and I am the second generation entrepreneur. My father started the business in 1958, making electrical switches, etc., by the name of Indo-Asian. And I joined the business in 1990. So almost exactly 30 years back. And when I joined, that was also around the time when Indian economy was just opening up. So my good fortune, I was perhaps at the right place at the right time, because I could see the whole journey of Indian economy opening up from being a quota-based, license Raj, which we keep hearing of. I saw the last few years of the license Raj, and then saw the internet boom, and the telecommunication boom, which came in the mid-90s and moved on. So while I sound like a dinosaur, but it's been a wonderful journey of trying to see how the nation has grown and what we have been able to do in the last 30 years. Indo-Asian itself became part of Legrand in 2010. At that time, when it became part of Legrand, that is about 10 years back, I was the president of Indo-Asian, and I was looking after a lot of the future businesses, new businesses, and overseas markets. That brought me in touch with Legrand, and one thing led to another. And so today I see myself as president of Legrand. Around the same time in my journey, I was also very active in the industry association. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with IEMA, the Indian Electrical and Electronics Manufacturers Association. It is perhaps the most vibrant organization in India for electrical and electronics industry. If you're not familiar with it, become familiar, and I will maybe post the link of this association to you. It has about 900 members, from the biggest of the big players like Power Grid and BHEL to Schneider and Siemens and L&T, and the multinationals to the mid-sized companies to the smaller industries. They're all members of this. And in 2000, around the same time, 2010, 2011, I was elected the president of the association, which was an interesting thing, from working on your company and the company's balance sheet to start looking at the industry and how the industry can really make a difference to the society. And over there, one of the things that we did, which I'm very proud of, was that we felt that Indian industry was having a lot of potential for growth, but at the same time, we were not fulfilling that potential, and we were all running scared of the Chinese onslaught. And we saw that the Chinese were making their products cheaper and supplying to Indian projects and tendering for government projects for electrification. And that was the time the grid was really expanding and power plants were coming up. And we needed a full strategy for the Indian industry. And one of the things that we did, unwittingly, I was heading the organization, so I was kind of coordinating this work. We developed a 10-year strategy for the electrical industry. And this we did with about 24 different government ministries and government departments, right? From Ministry of Power, Bureau of Indian Standards, at that time, the Planning Commission and Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Science and Technology, Department of Heavy Industries. So getting 24 ministries to sit around the table, to me, that was a challenge. Once they were sitting around the table, of course, making the strategy was easier, because my learning was, number one, if you have the right people around the table and they have the right motivation, you will get good results. You don't need to do anything. You just step back and let people interact, and they will come up with a good document. The challenge is getting the right people around the table and having them have the right motivation to do something. I think that's what worked for us. And that delivered a very interesting document, which was the Indian Electrical Industry Mission Plan for 10 years, 2012 to 2022, which is still in force, and it is managed by the Department of Heavy Industries. This work was very interesting, and much to my surprise, as this work was concluding, I was just suddenly called by one of the government departments, which said, "Hey, listen, are you familiar with IEC?" And I said, yes, of course. IEC is the International Electrotechnical Commission. They do all these standards work. And they said, well, we think that you will make a good candidate to represent India on the board. So you have to go for these elections. And these are hotly contested elections. So would you like to be the Indian candidate? And I said, in my lifetime, I've never stood for even college elections, let alone, IEC elections. I've never done that. So they said, well, you can take your time and think about it, because IEC, which is about a 110-year-old organization, India has tried in 110 years of 3 times to be a member, but we have never succeeded. And we think with you, we may stand a chance. So I said, okay, how much time do we have to think about this? And they said, well, tomorrow's the deadline to put in your name if you want to be a candidate. So I said, well, for me personally, the decision was almost made there and then that, okay, I cannot say no to the government of India, if they want me to be doing this, but I should at least take my close family, my wife into confidence, maybe some of my colleagues at work, and then say yes. And of course, in the family and at work, my colleagues were very happy and excited. They said, well, it's a very difficult election, and given that you have no track record of IEC or working there, let alone winning election to be on the board of IEC, totally unprecedented. It has never happened in the past. So somehow I took up that challenge, and for me, it was an interesting journey to look at even the election process more as a business project. We all, I'm sure you do some projects in school and college. So for me, it was more a project, and it was not about fighting an election. It was about what is the strategy and how do I implement it so that I am in the top three candidates, because there were three board members to be elected out of all the candidates, and there were 165 countries which were going to vote for this position. So that's how I started my journey in IEC, and I became a board member on January 1st, 2015. Of course, I won the elections, and from then on, I became a member of the board. Now I'm in my 6th year of membership. I was re-elected, and it's quite likely that we'll go for another round of elections later on this year in November. And I'm likely to be again, hopefully, keeping my fingers crossed, elected so that India continues to be represented on the board. So this is my journey. And while I was going through this journey in IEC, one of the challenges that I realized, for which the Bureau of Indian Standards, are you familiar with BIS, Bureau of Indian Standards?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So BIS, one of the challenges they had at that time was that we were trying to take the conventional grid, which is big generating plants, transmission lines, then the distribution network of taking the power from 133 kV down to 65 kV, 33 kV, 11 kV, and then distribute the electricity in villages so that villagers could, in every village, they could have a bulb at least or some basic use of electricity. That was the original plan in the country, for which the Ministry of Power was doing a lot. But somewhere it was felt that this is not delivering value, simply because either the forest clearance for putting transmission lines was not there, or the coal was not available. I'm sure you must have read about the coal problems, transmission line problems, or even land clearance for setting up some of these power plants. In some cases, there were challenges that there were some Adivasi villages which needed to be cleared for putting transmission lines. So there were a lot of challenges coming up. And that's around the time when the earlier government of Dr. Manmohan Singh, he was the Prime Minister in 2013, he wrote a letter to BIS saying that, well, why don't you look at this other thing called microgrids instead of taking all these transmission lines? And in India in 2013, we had no standards for microgrids. So how do you design something if there are no standards available? You can have some pilot projects, but you cannot have a mass scale deployment of microgrids and supply electricity to millions and millions of citizens. So because of my work in the industry, I was called in by BIS once again to look into this topic of microgrids. And that's when I was kind of co-opted by BIS along with a team from BIS. We went to IEC to make a representation on behalf of the country to see what can be done with microgrids and why electricity access is a challenge. And that's when I realized that the challenge was not only in India. We were at that time having about 31 crore Indian citizens not having any access to electricity. And at the same time, in 2013, in Africa, in all the countries of Africa, total, there were about 75 crore African citizens who were not having electricity at all. Worldwide, this problem was even bigger. Total across the world was about 125 crore people, as much as the population of India. Now, can you imagine? This is 21st century, and you and I can't live without our mobile phones and light bulb and fan and air conditioning and kitchen appliances and entertainment appliances. And there are more than 125 crore people without electricity. And that's where I think within IEC also there was a genuine interest to look at some of these issues. So a committee was formed, which was the IEC Systems Evaluation Group 4, which was for low voltage direct current and low voltage direct current for electricity access, which was primarily trying to analyze what can be done with DC microgrids. And I was appointed the convener for such a group at IEC. And these two roles kind of happened almost concurrently, looking at DC microgrids and also starting to work on the board of IEC around the same time in November 2014 and January of 2015. And that's when this started. And so since then, I've been fairly involved with IEC on this whole journey of rural electrification. So one of the questions that Teja had posed me was, what's the situation with rural electrification in India? And frankly, to me, the technology exists. Today, we are very familiar with the conventional technology of having power plants, transmission lines, step-down transformers, and bringing the electricity to 220 volts, putting a wire into a house, putting a fuse or a MCB, and then a light bulb. It works. DC microgrids do the same thing, but instead of the transmission lines and the power plants, there is some kind of localized generation. Localized meaning it could be in the same hut. You must have seen pictures. There are solar PV panels on the roof, and they just draw a line down and connect it to a light bulb. Or it can be a array of solar PV panels for the village, and from there they would pull the wire maybe a short distance of a few hundred meters and bring electricity to each hut. This is where direct current becomes more important, because traditionally our standards and our electrification codes are all meant for alternating current. Even though Thomas Edison started with direct current, his first network, which he did in 1893, which I speak of in my TED talk, was actually a DC network. And he was supplying electricity to parts of New York through a DC network. But as AC came in, DC kind of took a backseat and almost went out of common use. Now it is making a comeback, because if you think about it, localized power generation through solar PV panels all generate DC inherently. They don't generate AC. If they generate DC, and consumption devices, which is LED bulbs, small fans, or other devices you have, they all consume DC. Your mobile phones are charged with DC. You may end up supplying AC, but you have that little plug-in adapter like this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so these adapters, what do? They basically convert AC into DC. Sir. So the consumption is almost entirely DC. In your homes, in your classrooms, almost everywhere, consumption of power has gone to DC. Generation, if it is solar PV, it's DC. So it makes intuitive sense to connect them DC to DC directly. And this is why there is renewed interest in DC. And it's some people call it revenge of Edison, that it's coming back into fashion. There are some documentary movies, if you are interested to know about this current war between Nikola Tesla, who designed the first transformer, and how he made alternating current popular, and between Thomas Edison, who kind of made commercial application out of direct current. So there is a very interesting documentary on the web available to study this. So starting from there, we are moving on. Personally, I feel that for a nation like India, which is low on resources, financial resources, but we have a huge population which we need to serve, the true democracy of things lies in bringing electricity to everybody. At the heart of the matter is, if you don't supply electricity, it's a very tough life. I'm sure you can all relate to it. What if there was no electricity with you for 24 hours a week, a month? And imagine that we have villages in our own country which have never historically been touched by electricity. What is the lifestyle there? What is the life there? What is livelihood there? That's a huge, huge challenge. Now, the good thing is that the current government is very focused on it. So you must have read that every village in the country was connected to the grid last year. It was big news sometime in April of 2019. And that's a fact. Every village was connected. But if you read through the details of that news, it says that connecting to the village is about putting the physical infrastructure. That means there is a transmission line and there is a step down transformer and there are wires coming into the village. It does not say that there are electrons flowing over it. And that's a challenge. That you can put the network but not have electricity flowing. That becomes a challenge. And in many cases, there have been that either the transmission line was there, the network, they wanted to supply electricity, but the transformer blew up or something, or a fuse blew up, and the people still did not get electricity. So that's where I think India's challenge lies. Right now, to me personally, I don't think it's about the technology. The technology exists, and technology on DC microgrids and on the conventional power networks, both is very mature. It's the political will, it's the policy and the standards which need to come to pace. And there is a lesson in this story why I'm giving this whole long message on this. The message is that as engineers, sometimes you will be wedded to your idea of what you're trying to do, and you may have a great solution. If you are not able to convince others, or if you are not able to build a consensus around what you are thinking of, it means nothing. Standards are those which are adopted by everyone through consensus. The best idea, if it is one person's idea and he is not able to sell or convince the others on that idea, you will not be successful.
Yes, sir.
I'll come to this point a little later. Any questions? I've been going non-stop for about 24 minutes.
Yes, sir. I guess none of us have questions till now, sir.
Okay.
We're all clear with it.
Okay. So this is about DC microgrids and why they are relevant. The good thing is, with the effort that India started, we are now leading the development of standardization of DC microgrids and the underlying technologies, voltages, DC voltages for microgrids, etc. at IEC. And this work is proceeding through the leadership of Bureau of Indian Standards. And I'm also deeply involved with this work at BIS and at IEC. This work is being recognized in a big way. And perhaps it's a reflection of this work that in 2016 I was appointed IEC Ambassador, first for rural electrification and then for SDGs. How many of you are familiar with SDGs? Just show me by raising your hand. Okay, I see one of you. So let me give you a quick rundown on SDGs, which are the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015, if you recall some of the newspaper headlines, it was really bold headlines that India was one of the signatories, one of the first signatories to the Paris Accord. The Paris Accord was, of course, because it was in Paris, that 196 political leaders from the global, from all the countries, and 196 means almost the entire world, leaving aside, I think, North Korea and a few others who did not sign. The political leaders signed a pledge that they would guarantee 17 facilities or promises to all the citizens in their respective countries by 2030. So they had a 15-year window to deliver value, the same value to every citizen. For example, SDG 7 is about affordable and clean energy for all. So Mr. Modi signed this. So why is it that I have electricity, you have electricity, but many villagers don't have electricity? So this was a political statement made and a pledge made by Mr. Modi on the international platform, along with 196 other political leaders, to say this is guaranteed to be delivered to our citizens. This was done under the banner of United Nations, and I encourage you all to read up on the Sustainable Development Goals. There is a lot of literature, you will be inundated with it. In the Indian government also, there is a lot of work going on in this initiative. So because of SDGs, we are moving a little faster with the DC microgrid standards development, because this we see is a quick way of bringing electrification to rural Africa and many other countries. And that's the reason why last year I was appointed as IEC Ambassador for Sustainable Development Goals also. So not just on rural electrification, because the other goals are about clean water, reduction of poverty, good health, good education, etc. And so my work is more about how technology and standards can bring better life to almost everyone, and how do we enable every country to meet their goals through technology and use of IEC standards. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, any other questions? Now I'll open to any other questions or thoughts that you may have. Anything under the sun about my life, my journey, my studies. Maybe in the concluding remarks, I'll add some of my life learnings.
Yes, sir.
So something about electrotechnology.
Okay, what about electrotechnology? It's such a vast field. I could go on and on like an encyclopedia. The thing to remember is that technology itself is evolving. Even electrotechnology is evolving. Things will come and go. As young engineers, you need to have the fundamental knowledge of the basic principles. And one of the things that I have seen with many engineers is that we become fixated with technology. I think what we need is a fixation with being curious.
Yes, sir.
Curiosity is far more important than being fixated with a specific solution. If you're curious, you will learn more, you will explore more, and be sure that whatever you know, things are going to go beyond that. And sooner or later, whatever you know and you study in college will become redundant. So how do you become contemporary? How do you keep growing as a person? How do you keep growing not only in your profession, but in your inner self? And it's through learning. So curiosity is very critical for this. Electrotechnology has changed almost completely thanks to solid state electronics. Everything used to be electromechanical when I joined my business in 1990. Today, how many pure electromechanical devices do you see? Even the lighting has gone from a conventional incandescent bulb, which was 100 watts, to the same kind of illumination through LED lighting. In my home, I see all this lighting, this wonderful camera and the screen and the computers. Everything is working on direct current, which is solid state. So electrotechnology itself is changing also. And I'm not an expert on futurism or what is going to happen in the future, but I can assure you one thing, things will change. So if you think that you are very smart and you have become top of the class in college, that's great for now. Be sure that this will not be that way, because things will change. So being curious is an important value to inculcate. It will stand you in good stead when you grow further. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Any other question? I see some comments here.
Sir, right from the beginning, you are only talking about electrical technology and electricity. And can you tell something about electronics in India, like regarding electronic sector, how India has its growth or something?
Huge opportunity. My personal feeling, I did my industrial engineering more into production technologies and shop floor efficiencies, shop floor process technologies, etc. I did not study electrical technology. I don't know if my father was making something else. Maybe I would have ended up doing something else entirely. Electronics, in my opinion, is going to be the key differentiator in this century. And knowledge of electronics, software. In fact, my personal feeling, again, is from what I see, software, information, communication technologies are going to be critical for the future. So knowledge of those areas, knowledge of programming, regardless whether you become a coder in your life or not, but knowledge of programming and what it means is critical. Knowledge of electronics is important. I grew up producing circuit breakers, MCBs, we are even today one of the largest manufacturers of circuit breakers in the country. We make electromechanical circuit breakers. But I know that the world is moving towards solid state. That's all electronics. And we need to change with the times. So the big question for me is, how quickly is the change going to come upon us? And anytime I've tried to guess, I've been proven wrong, simply because the change comes much faster than whatever we think it is going to be. So you're in good space, electronics.
Sir.
Yes, sir. Do you think India should further move on to renewable energy resources than only depending more on nuclear energy sources?
If you are familiar with the energy mix in India, roughly 2/3 of our energy comes from coal or fossil fuel based energy. Out of the balance, 33% approximately, I think 25% is from renewables. The balance is nuclear. So nuclear is not very big in India. My personal view is renewables have a lot more potential in India. We have not exploited it. It's not because of lack of technology or the technology not being mature. I think it's more about policy and the right incentives. I think the price points have already come down enough that for the same 1 megawatt of electricity through fossil fuel or through solar PV, they are comparable costs. As a consumer, if you were to buy electricity, 1 unit of electricity, the bulk pricing of is also becoming comparable. The challenge is more to find the right capex, because any kind of renewables, there is a huge capex upfront. The running cost is almost nil or negligible. I mean, for a solar PV plant, the sun's rays are for free. The God Almighty has blessed us with enough of those. So the running cost is not there, but the upfront capital investment on the solar PV panels and the network, that is much higher. And even if there are villages where they are willing to pay for electricity, they are not able to afford electrification cost. So we have to differentiate between the cost of electrification and the cost of electricity. You and I can pay for how many units of electricity we consume, but can we pay for the transformer and the solar PV panels? So the government has to come up with adequate funding and financing schemes. This is where in India, I think the revolution which is coming into rural microfinancing is going to be helpful. So the way I'm describing, one of the things that I hope you all realize, that the engineering aspect of a solution is just one aspect. You have to look at the whole array of issues that go around it. There are political issues about electricity. There are funding, finance related issues. There are supply chain and logistics related issues. There are post installation maintenance issues. If you set up a network somewhere where the service person sits in the city, will he ever be successful? Which means that getting the rural communities to be educated on self-management of their solar PV systems, which means making the solar PV based systems, or I'm saying solar PV, but renewable systems, it could be anything. They should have the local skills to operate and manage their systems themselves, which connects to the education. How do we make sure that people are educated enough that they can manage their systems themselves, even if the financing is available? I've actually seen horror stories where villagers said, okay, sir, somebody came from the city, they installed this, but this is the worst thing because it worked only for 1 week and after that nothing happened. And guess what happened? On top of the hut, there was the solar PV panel. There was a storm and the panel just flipped upside down. So obviously it's not generating any more electricity, and nobody told the people in that village how they had to look after this. And maybe the installation folks who came, they did not fix the panel properly. So it's not really the technology. Many times it's so many other things around it which make a difference. Sure. Next. Yeah.
Sir, even though renewable resources are better, but their efficiency is not that good. So do you think we can fully depend on renewable sources?
Well, when you say it's not, the efficiency is not good, as compared to what? If you look at solar PV based renewables, for example, the sun's rays are free. So agreed that the efficiency today may be 22 to 25% of conversion. But if it is available for free, Baba, why are you being so worried about that? I can understand if this question came from the efficiency of a coal-fired plant. Now, coal-fired plants are also equally inefficient. Nobody talks about that inefficiency simply because coal-fired plants have been there for 100 years. So it's a relative thing. I'm not so concerned about the inefficiencies. They are there and they will remain. Wind energy, the cost of wind energy, once the capex is done, once the wind farm is, the windmill is installed, then there is no running cost. It's there. So efficiency then becomes purely a notion to keep in mind, but also at the same time, solar PV panels are, the technology is further improving, and the efficiency rates of solar PV panels are improving now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And also, sir, the need of new startups in energy domain, sir.
Mm-hmm.
So, most of the we see that if any bigger project, that would be like taken up by bigger companies. So how can the startups be encouraged in this domain, sir, like for more reach?
Okay, you'll get 100 different answers if you talk to different people. My point on this would be, you're right, the big companies can do the things on scale, but they cannot be innovative. A startup is actually there to incubate a specific idea. If you have a good idea, focus on that. Forget about scale. It's about that creative idea, that spark, which is going to create something unique. This company I was talking about earlier was using blockchain technology in a village through which the villagers could all have their own independent solar PV panels on the roof and have their own electricity. But if somebody was able to generate more but did not need it, and another one who needed more but he did not have enough generation, automatically, thanks to blockchain, there was electricity flow from one hut to another, and the account was maintained through blockchain. And at the end of the month, the villagers would between themselves square up whoever was drawing more. Or somebody had to pay another person 5 rupiah, and another one had to return 10 rupees. That was about it. They totally did away with the need of an electricity thanks to blockchain. Now, blockchain is cutting edge technology implemented in a village. Guess where? This was in Bangladesh. And to me, this is what innovate, and it is done by a startup. Do you think a big utility would be interested to do this? Maybe, maybe not. I cannot speak for them, but this is where the spark of the innovation, the innovators within the startups is. So if you have a great idea, think about it, bring it to the table, but don't think of immediately becoming a Google of the world. It may end up frustrating. What you really need to do is think of how you want to make it successful and create value for society.
Yes, sir.
Mhm. Sure.
Yes, sir. Sir, and also here, most of the engineers, most of us are from different branches. They are from CSE, they are from EC, they are from electrical. And can you tell us like what are the different roles of engineers in promoting the sustainable development goals and sustainable energy, sir?
No, tremendous, good question. To me, working on sustainable development goals or standardization is much bigger than the engineering skill that you may be acquiring. So think of yourself as assets to society who can do a lot more with it. It doesn't necessarily mean that your engineering skills are required. Frankly, if I look at my journey, even though I'm an engineer, I have rarely been required to think about the specific engineering skills, processes, mathematical models, coding. I learned Pascal language, which I'm sure none of you even knows of at that time. Those engineering skills become just bases on which you start developing your careers. Some of you may go into marketing, some of you may go into coding or into other areas, into manufacturing, into quality systems, into supply chain. What you learn on the job will be the specific skills which will enable you to execute that job or that work that is assigned to you. Engineering skills are more about thinking. When I can give my personal example. When I look back at what I really learned in engineering college, I must honestly confess there are only two things. One, I learned CAD drawing, and so I can read an engineering drawing. I'm very proud of that. But how many times do I read an engineering drawing? Maybe in the first 2 years in my work life. The rest of the 28 years, I've never had to read a drawing. The second thing, which I think is far more important, which I would like to leave with you as a message, the biggest thing that you are learning in college, which you may not realize today, is you're able to take a technical issue and use some tools to break it up and find a solution. A complex problem, finding a solution. Creating a correlation between a problem and a solution. I think that's what how to systematically apply some tools and break up a problem or a challenge and create a solution out of it. And going across various domains to bring that solution out. To me, that's perhaps the biggest learning I received in my college. I don't think I have used my manufacturing process knowledge or materials knowledge at all. And most of you, I am guessing, would be smart enough to get great jobs, but you will not be required to use those specific skills you are learning through the various courses that you have to study in those 4 years. What you will be really called to use will be, how do you understand a problem? How do you break up a complex problem into smaller problems? How do you solve it one by one to connect them together and come up with a whole solution? That's where a lot of your work is. I know that many engineers go into a consulting field. Do they ever start looking at materials and processes and coding? Not at all. But what it does is that consulting companies need the kind of skill that you are able to take a complex issue and break it up into parts and then give a solution on that. So think about yourself as in that role, and not just in the narrow defines of a few subjects that you may study. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Any more questions? So let me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Continue, sir.
In the last 13 minutes, let me share briefly what I have learned and what I personally have experienced in my life. And I wish there was somebody who would have told me these things. I would have possibly been better at what I am doing. But there are 3 things that stand out to me. And my message to you, which bear in mind and build into somewhere in your life or in your character, in your traits. I personally have gained a lot from it, and I think it will serve you well. Number 1, education that you are getting, engineering, is just one skill. It does not mean that when you graduate, you have become very intelligent and that you have achieved a lot. Learning is a lifetime journey. Every day you will be coming across challenges. So those who rely on just the learning of the college, 10 years from now, will be left behind. One of the things I feel that you need to do is keep learning, invest in yourself. There are 2 things in life that have always helped me. One is hard work, and the second is this ability to learn. Even every year, it is my personal value, regardless whether somebody pays for it or not. I invest 6 man-days of my time in personal growth and learning. So it is by going to executive development programs or other areas of study, or I do self-study or something, but at least 6 man-days. That means 6 days out of my holiday time I spend on just learning and refreshing my knowledge and making myself contemporary. Because if you don't, and you feel that maybe, most of you will graduate next year, that students of 2021, in 2040, when you are in the prime of your life and you're trying to lead organizations, 2021 knowledge will be totally historic. You really need to rediscover yourself every year. So keep building on the knowledge. Think of it as a cycle of growth. The second thing, which again, it's a pity that most engineering colleges or institutions in India, and most of them overseas also, don't focus on this, is communication. You are great engineers, and I'm sure you have a great college and you're learning a lot of new things. But your ability to communicate is the one which defines whether others will listen to you or not. I may be the best engineer or the person for DC microgrids or something, but if I can't convince you of what I'm saying, how will you even absorb it? Most colleges, my college, when I was in engineering college or when I did my MBA, nobody taught me that communication skills were so important. But if there is one thing which will